Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners from coast to coast and viewers too. Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take on all sorts of channels everywhere. And please, it's free. It helps. Get the word out. Hit that subscribe and hit that little bell so that you know when these are coming out, because we don't have a set schedule. However, this is my second one this week, so it's a first, and that's my plan, 2 a week. And you know, I got some feedback from various listeners, and they said they're too long. We love them, but they're too long. Okay? What we're going to be doing, since we're going to more frequent opportunities for you to look at my ugly maw each week, I'm going to keep these shows to 20 or 25 minutes. Okay? And instead of like in the last week, we hit 3 kind of different topics, 3 different segments, I'm going to kind of focus on one. Maybe we'll get into 2. So today, we're going to be talking about something that you're not thinking about, and that is the war of trades. And I don't mean tariffs. I mean shipping. Because the world, folks, lives on shipping. If you don't control the seas, you don't have a country. It's simple as that. Ask old-time England. Ask the United States up to now. Ask China, who's building a navy superior to ours. It's all about getting container and cargo and oil tankers to wherever they need to go without stress, without strife, and as fast as possible and as cheaply as possible. You're going to find this really fascinating. And by the way, the Panama Canal thing that Trump is jumping up and down about, it ties right in to his strategy and right into what we're going to be talking about today. First of all, the rant story. We're going to keep it brief. It snowed last night. Wow. That's kind of an event out here this year. To give you an idea, I think 3 years ago we plowed 47 times. 3 years ago we plowed 17 times. 2 years ago we plowed 47 times. Last year we plowed 7. This year, today, makes the 4th. I'll give you an idea how dry it is in the West. You bet. And there's a lot of planning that goes into dry, just like there's a lot of planning that goes into wet. In fact, deviations to any extreme require lots of plans, and that's the moral of today's story. And as far as a founder's quote today, I'm not going to do one. You know, all you have to do is look at what the judges are doing, the Obama judges. You've heard about the auto pen signatures of Mr. Biden. I mean, he was so feeble he couldn't even hold a pen. Now, who is running that auto pen? Well, we know who was telling whoever was running the auto pen when to use it, and that's our friend Barry and his buddy George. Soros is the last name. But it looks like all those pardons, you know, they're going to be invalid. They probably would have been invalid anyway, because the Constitution doesn't allow you to pardon preemptively a crime that has not been charged or that you've not been convicted for. But anyway, the saga of the auto pen, folks, is going to be alive and well for the next couple of months. Who knows what might get thrown out because of the use of the auto pen? You know, an executive order from a president, if it's not signed by the president, if it was signed by somebody else, is not the president's executive order. Just a hint. All right, we're going to start on the Panama Canal, because I think this will kind of tie in. I think it'll tie in better than starting from the other direction. So the Panama Canal, you've heard all this hoopla, blah, 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 and you'll see how it ties into the big picture. It's critical, okay? 48 miles long, 77 kilometers. There's several hundred double locks in it, which raise water so that the ship can pass. They're actually going uphill on the water, right? They had to build an entire lake to feed the thing. They all the locks, which lock in the water and then The ship raises and then it can go over to the next one, to the next lock. They're all fed with gravity-fed siphon tubes and culverts from this big lake that was built down there. And it's kind of interesting because the idea of creating that canal actually began in 1549. That's right. It was Ferdinand de Lesseps, the builder of the Suez Canal in Egypt, right? And the task was rather difficult, obviously, right? Spain wanted a way to get the gold and silver from Peru, Ecuador, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, back to Spain as fast as possible. The alternative is going around Cape Horn. It's 8,000 miles more to do that sail around Cape Horn. Think of the fuel in today's days. Think of the time in the days of wind-powered ships. And Cape Horn, which is the southern tip of South America, is treacherous waters, closed a significant portion of the year because of the treacherous weather. So this was a long-held idea that was coming. In 1534, they tried to get it going. There was a Spanish bureaucrat. He gave up. Too expensive. Couldn't figure out how to do it. There were surveys that were done between 1850 and 1875 when America began to figure out this would be key to American trade. And in 1899, the U.S. Congress created the Isthmian Canal Commission. In other words, Panama. And they also looked at an alternate route through Costa Rica, which is kind of interesting. It was Teddy Roosevelt and the new state, brand new country of Panama, that signed a treaty, the Buno Varilla Treaty. And it secured for the United States a continuous lease on a 10-mile strip in which the canal would be centered. It wasn't built yet. And Panama was to be compensated an early payment of $10,000 and an annuity of $250,000 beginning in 1913. That tell you how the dollar has depreciated? Yeah, just a little bit, just a little bit. And the construction of a lock canal, because they had originally thought just of building the channel, but it didn't work. You know, water doesn't flow uphill. Was decided in 1906, and the first construction facilities began in August 1909. The locks were built in pairs, each lock 1,000 feet long, and each lock would raise a ship, this is incredible, 85 feet above sea level to move to the next lock. I mean, it's, you know, this was a while ago. They didn't have the engineering and the expertise we had today. The overall cost, the canal opened August 15th, 1914. It was dedicated July 12th, 1920. $336,650,000 was the cost. 240 million cubic yards of dirt had to be moved. I mean, think about that. Wow. And 38,000 Americans died building it, most of it through disease and snakes, by the way. There were treaty amendments in 1939. Panama's annuity increased to $465,000 a year. You don't think the dollar is depreciated, huh? And there were different things going on with the guarantee of the United States in defending the sovereignty of Panama, et cetera. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. In 1955, the income was bumped up to $1,930,000 a year. And the United States built a second channel so ships could pass both ways. Prior to that, only one ship could move through the canal and only in one direction. Now it was a two-lane road, so to speak. In 1977, Jimmy Carter, the peanut farmer, the predecessor to Barack Obama, he decided that it just wasn't fair that America, who built it, lost 38,000 lives, paid for it for every year, had an agreement. It wasn't fair that the big bad United States was, you know, taking advantage of poor little Panama. So he abrogated the treaty with them and he sold it back to them. I'm not making this up, folks, for $1. That's right, $1. It's kind of like selling border wall supplies for 5 cents. I mean, in the end, Democrats, progressives, and communists are all one and the same, and they are always the same, are they not? Anyway, so in 1977, we lost the Panama Canal. Well, as we're going to get into here very quickly, this strategy of trade, which is really kind of World War III going on right now, and will determine the future of China, Russia, the United States, and others. China was not so foolish as Jimmy Carter and later on Barack Obama. No, not quite so foolish at all. In fact, a Chinese company now owns the ports on either side of the Panama Canal, and they are guarded by Chinese troops. Terrific, terrific. And this is kind of the strangulation theory, the strangulation methodology of China, Russia, Iran, that group, the BRICS group, against the West, not that Europe really counts, the United States, North America, the American hemisphere, right? The trication of the world's spheres of influence. But the trication of the world's spheres of influence, folks, don't matter if you can't get goods and services to your sphere of influence and you can't export them from your sphere of influence. And China knows this. Unfortunately, the people who've been in power for the last 20 years, like, Barack Obama and his cadaver stand-up buddy with the auto pen, Joe Biden, they probably knew it, and they were probably delighted that America was going down the tube because that's really their deal, right? You think, well, none of this stuff was an accident, folks, and none of it was incompetent. This was all intentional. We'll talk about that in an upcoming show. Alfred Thayer Mahan, he laid out the brutal truth of global power, folks. Whoever rules the waves rules the world. And he wasn't talking about fleets of warships. That's just part of it. He was talking about controlling the choke points of world commerce and trade between oceans and in the oceans. China, Russia, and Iran have spent the last 2 decades turning strategic passageways into shadow control points, right? And extracting a toll, so to speak. And the Trump administration has now realized this is an emergency. And it is an emergency because, as with everything else, they are way ahead of us because the folks at the helm were intentionally asleep at the switch. You might know that Trump published a strong rebuke and launched a large-scale military strike against the Houthis over there. Well, the Houthis, they control the Bab el-Mandeb choke point, U.S. ships and international trade. And the clue as to what was going on and how Biden, Obama's third term, and the Democrats have been mishandling this since Jimmy Carter, giving away the Panama Canal, came in the form of a rude awakening when an American-flagged oil tanker that happened to be, it was called the Overseas Santorini. It was actually an American ship under lease to the American military carrying jet fuel for planes and things that you need for war over in the Mideast. And it docked in Gibraltar, a British port, supposedly our ally. Remember we talked a few weeks ago about London and all that stuff? Yeah. Well, it docked in Gibraltar, and all of a sudden the English wouldn't refuel it. Now, they poo-pooed it off as, oh, it was just a bureaucratic snafu and all that kind of stuff. Ostensibly one of our closest allies. But that's not really what it was, folks. That was the control of a choke point. And 7 months later, history repeated itself. This time, Trump was president. It was in his first month. The Norwegian Bunker Company, bunkers are when they fill up ships, etc., at ports, and I can't really pronounce it, so I'll do my best. Haltbach, B-A-K-K, bunkers, announced that it would refuse to refuel U.S. affiliated ships in protest of Trump's meeting with Zelensky. Remember, Europe wants war with Russia. Be careful what you ask for. Which is, by the way, another truism in life. Be careful what you ask for sometimes. The White House, shall we say, pulled some strings, and within hours, unlike the British deal with Cadaver and Obama, the Norwegian government said, "No, don't you worry. It's okay. We're going to fill up. You bring a ship in here, and we will refuel it. We will take care of it." So Norway kind of backed down. And the choke points, by the way, are not just areas of concern for military planners, and they are. They're extremely critical. But they are the fault lines of economic power. Those are the pressure points that will determine who controls the movement of oil and food and raw materials around the globe. And China gets this. You know, I brought you shows on the rightsideradio.com, go into the archives. I brought you a whole series of shows on China's Silk and Road Initiative, Belt and Road Initiative around the globe, railroads and ports and all sorts of things, right? This is China's way of controlling global trade. This is China's way of making U.S. number 2 or maybe number 4 or 5 and China number 1. And we've been asleep at the switch, but no more. And we're going to be getting to that in just a moment. If a nation can't move its goods freely or bring them in to ship them out, its economy, folks, is at the mercy of whoever controls the lanes of transit, in this case, the oceans, which carry most of the world's goods. I told you many times that all wars are economic. And here we are. Here we are. When Trump took office, China controlled both ports at the ends of the Panama Canal, held major stakes at the terminals on either side of the Suez Canal, the Bosporus, and the English Channel. You think they've been busy while we've been asleep, purposely asleep? It has a naval base at the entrance to the Red Sea. And in the Pacific, the Luzon Strait, which is really one of the most vital of all shipping lanes in the world, is under near constant surveillance and harassment by the Chinese Navy, Coast Guard, and maritime militia. This is the whole Philippines, South China Sea, Vietnam, etc., and Japan. In the Straits of Hormuz, right, this is the Mideast, 20% of the world's oil go through the Straits of Hormuz. You've heard about it. And that's like one skip and a jump from Iran shutting it down. I mean, they can be there in minutes and blast ships, block the straits, you name it. And then you have the East China Sea, the Yellow Sea, and the Sea of Japan. And guess what? They are within striking distance quite easily of North Korea's somewhat, shall we say, erratic leadership. Yes, and not on our side, I might add. So Trump and his team are going on the counteroffensive. There is now just in the last 2 weeks, a maritime war room in the West Wing. His National Security Council, the NSC, they have a new weapon in that war room. The guy's name is Jerry Hendricks, one of the foremost, if not the foremost, naval historian and authority on Mahanian strategy, right? We just talked about Mahan. You don't control the sea lanes, you don't control squat. You're going to be toast. He's there to provide the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, to a lesser extent, Tulsi Gabbard, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth with all their options so that the team can reverse this 20-year getting our butt kicked because we closed our eyes deal that we're in. the hole that we're in. There's an executive order being prepared. It's called Make Shipbuilding Great Again. We'll see if it gets signed. But one of the prongs of the counteroffensive here, and there's many: diplomatic pressure, economic pressure, tariffs and taxes on ships docking in ports other than American ports, all sorts of things. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. I'm sure CBS, NBC, and CNN will be crying about it all the time when they wake up and know that it's happening, which I guess could be never. The State Department was going to lean hard on treaty partners like the UK, that wouldn't fuel our military lease ship. Singapore, Taiwan, Egypt. Okay, they're going to impose tariffs and trade restrictions on Chinese-built ships and cargo handling equipment. I mean, this is a big war, and this is all part of the tariff deal. The tariffs are a much bigger play. Panama is part of a much bigger play, folks. There might even be a harbor tax on foreign cargo entering North America. Oh, that starts tying into everything they're saying about Canada, too. Or through Mexico. Do you see how all these seemingly disjointed tentacles are wrapping together in one octopus of regaining our footing as controlling world trade? Yeah, you bet. You bet. You bet, you bet. So, one of the things that we're going to do here over the next few years, we're going to see this hammer employed, okay? And this is going to be painful in the beginning. It's going to be painful in the beginning. The Federal Maritime Commission, the FMC, which has been kind of a backwater, have a sandwich and take a nap type office in Washington, D.C., they've now been completely re-empowered. They're being restaffed with top-notch, pro-America, America First people. But this radical expansion is also empowering it to oversee not just the U.S. ports, which was kind of its old sleepy job, but the entire global trade ecosystem. And that includes, and this is the mandate for this newly empowered FMC, the first 7 of the world's most critical choke points: the English Channel, the Malacca Strait, the Northern Sea Passage, the Singapore Strait, the Panama Canal, we're kind of on that, the Strait of Gibraltar, and the Suez Canal. So you see how all this works, right? And it's the survival of your country. And it's the survival of your economy. And under extreme conditions, it might be whether you have fuel in your car, clothes on your back, or food on your table. We're going to be talking more about this in the context of our ongoing discussions of the 3 superpowers tricating the world into spheres of influence. This is going to be very, very, very interesting couple of years, folks. Very interesting. And it's 5-dimensional chess that's being played now between the superpowers. And you know what? Unfortunately, most of the population, and certainly the mainstream media, doesn't have a clue, doesn't want to have a clue, and probably isn't capable of even understanding the clue if it was presented, which is why you have me and others like me. Thanks for listening. Hopefully I'm under my time limit here, and we'll have another show to you just days away. And we'll go over, since I didn't have time today under this new time maxim, all the nonsense that's being pulled by the left to try and slow Trump down, including corrupt Obama judges. You probably heard some of it. I don't want to give too much of it to you because you'll upchuck your lunch. It's really that bad. It's unbelievable. All right, read Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take. Remember, please hit subscribe, hit the little bell. It's all free. It's all great. Keep the wind at your back. We'll talk to you in a few days.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Read Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.